Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this wonderful program. I'm Lucy Handley from the Ridgefield Library, here to introduce our poet laureate, Barb Jennis, who has come up with so many great series for us and so many good programs. And this is one of my favorites. Welcome, Barb.
Well, thank you, Lucy, and thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Ridgefield Library, for giving us this forum. It's, as you know, I'm sure you all are very appreciative of your public libraries, and you just can't beat them as a resource for so many things. So welcome to this evening's reading. We have 5 incredible poets. As I've had to explain a couple of times, even though it says poems from Connecticut's 4 corners, there are actually 5 poets because we also include the central Hartford region as a 5th area. And we are recording, so we do ask that you keep your mute button on, and that if you want to comment as poets are reading, feel free to type into the chat any comment. It's always fun if you're a reader to go back and see what people have said along the way. And then in the end, we'll have a talk back session. You're free to ask questions of the poets, to make public comments to them, and I hope you enjoy it. So we're gonna start off this evening with Brad Davis, and I always try to, before I do Brad's biography, let me just let you know that our April National Poetry Month session of Poets from Connecticut's 4 Corners will include Connecticut Poet Laureate Emerita Margaret Gibson, Peggy D. Shea, Charles Rafferty, Srinivas Mandavili, and Sandy Carlson. So please come back in April. These are also wonderful, wonderful. So here we go. First up, we have Brad Davis. Brad Davis is the author of 7 full-length collections of poetry, 4 with Antrim House, Though War Break Out, Song of the Drunkards, No Vile Thing, and Like Those Who Dream, and 3 with Whip and Stock / Cascade, Opening King David, Still Working It Out, and Trespassing on the Mount of Olives. Brad's chapbooks include Short List of Wonders, which won the Sunken Garden Poetry Prize, and Self-Portrait with Disposable Camera. In 2011, he was hired by Hillstead Museum, home to the Sunken Garden Poetry Festival, to edit the festival's 20th anniversary anthology, Sunken Garden Poetry 1992 to 2011, which was published by Wesleyan University Press. Brad's poems have appeared or are forthcoming in a wide variety of journals, among them Poetry, Paris Review, Michigan Quarterly Review, JAMA, Connecticut River Review, the anthology Waking Up to the Earth, Connecticut Poets in a Time of Global Climate Crisis, and published by Brayson Press, and many others. As an educator, Brad has taught at Pomfret School and the Stony Brook School, and served as an adjunct professor at College of Holy Cross and Eastern Connecticut State University. So welcome, Brad.
Thank you, Barb. And thank you, Ridgefield Library, for hosting. And as well, thank you, all of you who showed up. It's nice to see some familiar faces. I'm going to be contributing 5 poems to Poems from Connecticut's 4 Corners. 1 from my latest book, Trespassing on the Mount of Olives, and then 4 very new ones. The title poem for the book has an epigraph. Mount Olive. A 19-year-old was arrested on trespassing charges over the weekend when he entered a house without permission and fell asleep on the couch. He was released on his own recognizance and has a pending court appearance. I picked that up from the Star Ledger while I was cruising online. I found that, and it was on nj.com, newjersey.com. The poem is entitled Trespassing on the Mount of Olives. The young man claimed he thought it was a friend's house. Inebriation, no surprise, having scrambled his familiar world. There was no malice intended, no evidence of a forced entry, no resistance in the morning when the homeowner arranged for an officer to escort the lad courteously to a squad car. Though I have never awakened on a strange couch in a stranger's house, I did wake up into sentience in the early 60s thinking, where am I and what am I doing here? Though I have never been to Mount Olive, New Jersey, I have spent years of my reading life on the Mount of Olives, trespassing, looking for a brown-skinned teacher I never met growing up in white post-war Episcopalian America. A rough, street-level itinerant, he recalibrated the good life, lavishing crazy affection on outcasts, the immoral, and others like me, and pitched his tent in that grove where it's rumored he sweat blood and suffered betrayal, and when swords were drawn to defend him, parried sharply, enough of that. This morning in Connecticut, I've again ascended the mount, wondering, where is he? And what on earth am I doing here? Wanting more than anything to stay alive a little longer, long enough to see our son joyful, our marriage more than you or I could have imagined, and my own court appearance pending. Now for the new ones that have never, this is a first for them, their maiden voyage. Solo. Because she appeared there once, I have ever since, at least twice a day, looked for her on that or some other branch visible through our sliding glass porch door. Her solo visit to the perimeter of our condo complex was wholly unanticipated. Her white head and tail pure royalty. And now my heart wants more and more the feral beauties of earth, less and less the mannered artifacts of my kind, whether books or fine furniture or even art. I would easily trade the hallowed contents of the Met for a permanent exhibit of raptors and mountains, rivers and the wilding sea we witnessed yesterday off Beavertail Light State Park, and that one man sitting for hours about the business of attending to the wind, the rhythms of wave after wave, the warmth of the granite in full February sunlight, sitting there on that glacier-carved collar of our one earth. This next one is an ekphrasis. I don't know how to pronounce this German artist's name, but it's Fritz von Uhle, I'm guessing, something like that. It's a response to his piece, Transition to Bethlehem, which is a wonderful study in grays and browns. It's amazing. The bow saw, which is one of those bows that's a handsaw and it can be very large. Anyway, handsaw. The bow saw. A lantern burns in the cold January mist. The wet, muddy lines in the unpaved road disappear into the unseasonal fog. Two laborers on the narrow, unpaved road walk slowly toward what looks like a bench abutting one of the winter bare trees in that line, the muddy road opposite where the lantern burns in the cold midwinter mist. The couple look to be returning home from a long day's work. She in the big house, her right arm limp, a small basket hanging from fingers about to give way, his right arm under her left, supporting. She leans into him. He, a woodsman, the bow saw over his left shoulder, saying his care all day was cutting branches, clearing land for others' new homes, hardly the fine carpentry he would prefer. One gets the feeling that they may not soon arrive at their warm but drafty row house in town, the town hidden behind a January mist, the mist a ghost of snow lost to a thaw. Perhaps the couple is a holy one, they expecting, he anxious for her, she undone from carrying a child whom the angels will fawn over, though she cannot know that, nor he. They have only the mist and mud and each other. I had fun with this one. It's also the most pessimistic of the bunch. It's called An Alien Mother Instructs Her Offspring. Evidence is accumulating. Humanity may have a mind, which is to say, their neck of the universe is not without a fan, a witness with, granted, severely limited perspicacity, but observant nonetheless, capable of making surprisingly good sense, more or less adoringly, more or less with the program. But unless you're prepared, don't venture too close for a peek into what mind there may be there. It is clearly adolescent, so requires further development of its executive functioning. Think mind as blunt instrument, sledgehammer or maul, turned upon itself, vicious, even cruel. Therefore, best to keep one's distance till well versed in self-defense against grossly high levels of unpredictability. Think tricky interiors from which means of egress are precious few and fraught with mortal risk. Do not be fooled by how small the animal is. The initial, or how warm the initial grace of hospitality. However winsome, clever, and endlessly invented the human mind may appear, it is also, by its own pathological admission, as documented in books and films, a murderer and thief. Not long for this universe we know and love. If I may borrow an idiom of their making, from their frequent bad luck on oceans, not a ship one would wish to go down with. And then finally, I don't know if any of you were watching the Grammy Awards this last time round, in particular the premiere ceremony where they hand out most of the awards, and it avoids much of the glitz that happens on national television. There was a very sweet moment in that event. This poem's called, and again, thank you for having me on, Barb. This has been an honor. This is entitled To Honor the Engineer. When Jack Antonoff waved her up to the stage so they could receive the statuette together, he didn't stop there. He introduced her by name, honoring her role in the many recording projects for which he alone was being honored as producer. Jack didn't have to do that. He didn't have to hold up the show while she left her seat and made her way through the dark to where he stood on the stairs to the stage waiting for her to join him. Then she, self-conscious and off to the side of the microphone, leaned away as Jack all but handed her the award. Her smile eclipsing the sequined gray gown she likely rented for the gala. In that premiere ceremonial setting, she stood out. Laura Sisk, a tad goofy and glittering in the unexpected light. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, Brad. Wonderful. And you have a magnificent reading voice as well. Really brings the poems to life. So thank you very much. I did put Brad's biography in the chat if you're interested. And I will introduce our next poet as well. Irene Sherlock is a dual licensed marriage and family therapist and alcohol and drug counselor who practices in Danbury, Connecticut. She holds an MFA in creative writing from Goddard College. Her poems, essays, and short stories have been published in Chautauqua Literary Journal, Connecticut Review, Dos Passos Review, Fairfield Review, Intima, Poet Lore, Pulse, Runes, Tar Wolf Review, the New York Times, as well as many other journals and in several anthologies. A chapbook of her poems, Equinox, was published in 2010 by Finishing Line Press. So please welcome Irene Sherlock.
Oh, thank you so much, Barb. It's an honor to be reading with these talented writers. I am just so grateful. Thank you. So as Barb says, I'm a therapist. This is a late in life profession for me. I came to this when I was about 60, actually a little sooner, but anyway, I was lucky enough to spend the first 7 years of my professional life as a therapist in an outpatient setting, working with incredibly talented people. And I've had a private practice for about 10 years now. So the first two poems that I'm going to read reflect my work in outpatient. And the last three really reflect what it's like to do private practice. When I had my office in the agency where I worked, I had artwork around the office, and sometimes clients would come in and comment on the various, a lot of them were abstracts. And so this poem, this first poem really comes out of that experience. It's called Rorschach. Above my desk, a flock of yellow birds stare out from a white canvas. Inky eyes, orange beaks, streaks of feathered green. Yellow birds, some close, some distant on a branch spying from an unseen tree. Clients want to know what it means. I like it, they'll say, as if appreciating art means they're not too far gone. No one wants to be too far gone. When I'm making their next appointment, they'll search my bookcase, scan titles about couples therapy, eating disorders, addiction. One man stands and inspects my license. A regular turns on the fan each week, complaining about the heat. Almost everyone helps themselves to the candy jar, Tootsie Rolls, Snickers. They tell me about their next court date or their crazy ex who called the cops and how dare that son of a bitch say I started it. They sit across from me and tell me things, and sometimes ask about the birds in the painting. I have no real answer other than to say it's a gift from my niece, an artist. A man yesterday fingered his appointment card, cocked his head, seemed uneasy with this explanation. Or maybe he was thinking about the rain pelting the window, how he didn't have an umbrella, and it was a long walk down the hill to the bus stop. At the end of every individual session and after a group, we had to write what we call progress notes about all the clients. And so this poem is called Progress Notes. Pushing through the double doors at work, I think about my brother, unconscious in the hospital, how I'll call his wife before men's group at 5. Tired guys who yawn and say their stomachs growling, how they're better than raking leaves, lifting garbage, but that's all they can get with a record. Men who've owned and lost businesses, wives, children. Middle-aged, tatted up men with goatees who tell the young ones, don't be like me, get this now. Young ones slump under hoodies or push back their Yankee caps. Someone says his mouth waters just driving through the neighborhood where he scores. The others nod, swear, look over at me, apologize. They stay clean for their mothers, kids, probation. Fuck probation, someone says. I think about the times I drove drunk, how I was never caught or crashed, and now I'm sitting in this chair facing them. My brother's in a hospital states away, conscious now, but I don't know that yet. As I settle into my office, as men descend stairs, disperse into a darkened parking lot, they'll light up cigarettes and someone will offer someone a ride home. The rest will follow each other down the road, and while they do, I'll pull up their charts, the only sound, my clicks on the keyboard. Client was emotional, grateful to his boss, who'll hold his job while he serves 45 days for his last DUI. Private practice. A woman sits in my office weeping, waiting for the ambulance to take her to the emergency room, where they'll ask her whether or not she wants to kill herself. We go outside, sit on the stoop so she can smoke. I've left my sweater inside, but I won't leave her, so we wait in the cold spring air, the sidewalks chill rising inside me. The woman is calm now, smoking, talking about calling her sister to say where she'll be, and while she talks, a pair of birds flit between branches of a willow tree, moving between spokes of leaves and sun. I think about smoking, given up years ago, and wonder if there's a plan, or is it random, this day, this woman? The ambulance arrives and one man wrestles with the gurney while the other talks to the woman who's calm now and stands, nodding to something I cannot hear. Part of me wants to draw nearer, but I remain here, focused on the birds, settled now in the shimmering tree. During COVID, I gave up my office because we saw everyone via telehealth, and I still see a lot of clients that way, just like this. And I would occasionally see people in my home, and my colleagues would say, "Ooh, isn't that a little risky seeing people in your home?" And I'd say, "No, it's fine." And then this is the one time I was a little apprehensive and rethinking my seeing clients in my home model. It's called Two Men, a Summer Evening. The last client of the day in my home office, a house painter, pants spattered, baseball cap pulled down, sitting in shadow, but I saw his high. Yeah, he confirmed. His dealer found him. I can't get away. His voice certain, his lot as fixed as dusk settling. Outside, katydids made themselves heard. Cicadas buzzed near flowering hydrangeas at my open window. The hour before, a grizzled man long in recovery who labored in my yard each week, mowed careful symmetry, a million blades of green shifting light. He keeps the grass lush to hide imperfections, shelter from the scorch of sun. Today he brought zucchinis, tomatoes his wife had grown. I'd sliced them once the painter left, but he was still talking. I said his name. Our time was up. He looked over as if surprised at where he was, then motioned to an abstract on the wall. Is that new? He fixed his gaze on me, smiled. You live alone? Have a husband? I stood. He got to his feet, swaying. Outside, insects called from the earth's floor, a swarm of katydids, crickets, drumming my evening lawn. Or was it my heart I heard, strumming, fearful, as he strode past, left the room. Thank you again, Barb, and thank you to all of the people who attended tonight. This is called Red Beret, last poem. This morning, there was frost-darkened blood on my porch deck, a trail disappearing into the hoary winter lawn. I imagined a wild, injured thing, a skunk or feral cat, how it couldn't change its fate and die on a warm porch, instead afraid, left behind a swath of crimson on my glass storm door. I imagined a life receding while I slept, a life drawing shallow breaths beneath the tall pines it struggled to reach at the edge of my night yard. Now, the day already drawing down, a client sits across from me weeping. Her son has overdosed again, is somehow alive, she says, again. The women in her Al-Anon group this morning told her, let go and let God. Now she removes the red beret she wears and tousled blonde hair escapes into the warm room. She finds my eyes. I say what I say. Soon she tells about the new granddaughter, her own eyes clear. How beautiful the child is, just born, she exclaims. As she makes her next appointment, I look up and see wisps of blonde being tucked back into her beret. I marvel at how she lifts herself, grasping her handbag to make her way across the carpet and out to the porch, turning to wave through the glass door. How firmly she pulls her red beret down against the wind with one free hand. Thank you.
Beautiful reading. Thank you so much. Amazing stories, and really you bring an amazing life to them and to the characters you depict and just all the connections you make. So thank you so much. Beautiful. Oh boy. Okay, so next we have, and again, folks, if you'd like to put comments in the chat, please feel free to do so. Next up, we have Robert Claps. Robert retired a few years ago from a career as a software developer at a major Hartford insurance company. His first book, Casting, was published by Antrim House in 2021. A 3-time Pushcart nominee, Robert's poems have appeared widely in publications including Comstock Review, the Atlanta Review, the American Literary Review, Connecticut River Review, Image, Tar River Poetry, Gray's Sporting Journal, Holland's Critic, and others. A father of 3 children, he lives in East Hampton, Connecticut. So welcome, Robert.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. That's a good start. I'm going to try to squeeze in 6 poems, and only one is from the book because I don't want to give it away for free. I want people to buy it, so I have to. So, but 5 are new ones, and everyone likes their newest stuff. So, there's a couple Connecticut-related poems. I'm going to start with a poem called September, Groton Long Point. There are moments when a rush of air, morphing into wings, turns the heads of dog walkers, joggers, even clam diggers, and makes them look up. No Coast Guard helicopter, but a ribbon of sandpipers, up from the nuclear submarine base, clears the point and settles on Crescent Beach. Like the homeless culling water streets trash for cans, a month from now they'll migrate. Common or least, plain as brown grocery bags with a splash of white. They flit and race along these flats, gleaning the rack for worms and catching flies in the outgoing tide. God's industrious angels, their song is a string of high-pitched whistles, nothing divine, but here we are, people and dogs strolling, everyone unleashed on the spit of sand, some of us picking through summer's flotsam, others clawing the flats with crude rakes or running for all they're worth until the tide starts to turn. So on that kind of environmental local theme, one from the book called River Returning. Every evening now, a great blue gliding down through the oaks, just leafing out, stands motionless on these banks, where growing up we threaded our way among bald tires, dead carp, leaking barrels of solvents, the mills our fathers worked at, dumped when no one was looking. Wasn't the river ours to burn? 3 shifts a day with all the overtime you wanted turned the water green, but even Uniroyal couldn't kill it, and the river is growing young again. Spawning shad find the ancient ruined channels and run upstream in numbers no one living remembers. Yet the oysters of Long Island Sound work overtime to filter out the particles of this century's plastic waste. How tenuous it all is. Watch the infant oak leaves tremble as you move quietly, hoping to get closer before the wings creak open, and without moving, the blue is gone. Okay. Moving right along. I have a page here with all the, okay, page 101. So now kind of a spring type theme. Everybody looks forward to spring. Here's a poem called Portals. At the garden store's summer clearance sale, you paid $3 for this glass feeder with a cobalt blue finish and 4 flower-shaped ports to accommodate those almost weightless messengers who come here to refuel as they travel between this world and maybe the one in which your daughter now lives. Hand me a nail, love, let's hang it, brimming with sweetened water above your wicker reading chair. Sometimes routine tasks suffice. Other times we live on Zoloft and luck. What price would you pay to whirl out of your limbs and follow those flocks forming in our oaks? The resurrection season is nowhere in sight, but watch that Hummer, persistent, flying sideways, then backpedaling at the same time until it finds, half buried in weeds, the one flower still intact, and sustaining its hover, lights into your blood, its bird heart now yours, pea-sized but pumping hard, its beaded eyes, your clear eyes that don't even blink when you look up into fall's unrelenting blue. And let's go to April East Hampton. I had to get my town name in there somewhere. April East Hampton. Peepers, the year's first, scattered around the rim of the night pond, a few off to the southwest side, some on the opposite edge, but it's the loud one straight ahead that brings me with flashlight out to the deck, knowing only my long dead father could croak like that, offbeat and off key, the way he'd croon strangers in the night, dancing a tipsy little two-step with Doris or Rose at Baldy's tap. That frog so persistent, I have to train my light out a good 100 yards, close to the Twin Oaks, where I thought he was, but isn't now, like the quarter my father would make disappear and then pull from behind my ears, his hands always faster than our eyes. And maybe this is one of his tricks, getting my attention with that voice, raspy and intermittent in the thawing air. The voice I start to follow, then stop, then start again, knowing it's still mud season, and if I sink ankle deep, there is no way I could ever get out. Okay, do I have time for a couple more? All right, I have the thumbs up. And let's go to, here's a poem called Gardening St. Bridget's. I have a bunch of Catholic poems, what I call Catholic poems in the book, and some new ones. You can never get that out of you. So this is Gardening St. Bridget's. The faces of patron saints glowed as they gazed down, glued to sticks that marked each of our egg cartons. 21 sixth graders tramping down Burpee's seeds, beans, radishes, big boy tomatoes, lovely Cindy Bennett planting cosmos because they would match her purple beaded necklace, while Sister Arlene drifted down the rows, reminding us on Creation's Day, he commanded the earth to bring forth plants bearing seed. Even from my desk by the windows, I could hear Richie Festa whisper, "You could have my seed," making Cindy laugh and bringing Sister down the aisle, black robes billowing to whack Richie 3 times with her brass edge ruler, her face burning against the white habit as she shouted, "Unless we renounce Satan, we will grow crooked," and strode up to the blackboard where she wrote, "Like saplings in a strong wind," in yellow chalk and underlined it twice. You could imagine how in that instant our backs had straightened, how our fingers scented with dampened dirt fluttered and went still, how in that silence each of us prayed for salvation or the dismissal bell. It was April. From the second floor windows where we set our sodden cartons, we could hear birds darting among the trees that bordered the playground. We could see the snowbanks pitted with gravel and piss stained, recede along the median that divided center and main. In a month or less, girls would be out parading in their shorts and halter tops, and our first shoots would push up and tear the soil. Okay, I think I'll do one more, if I could. And it's called Here in April. Not a lot of variation on these titles, I know, but what are you gonna, I've been writing about 20 spring poems. I can't stay away from spring poems, and publishers seem to like them. You know, you write a good spring poem, you're gonna get published. Here in April. 5 years have passed. Soon you will place a lavender wreath by your oldest daughter's stone. A green haze halos our hills, and in the yard, spring's first redwing flies from feeder to fence post, singing and calling. What meaning could we assign to this bird refueling on bits of oat and corn, flashing its shoulder patch in a month of promise, when the loss of a child seems more out of time? Green rises and shoots and sharp blades, wands of forsythia spark yellow, but you want to wrap yourself in dull tweeds, coats as drab as the ones winter finches wear. The redwing keeps trilling its 3-note riff our thermal panes cannot keep out. Days from now, the nesting will start. If we learn to sing in voices of pure joy and pure pain, April might take hold, and we could unlatch the windows, leaving ourselves open to the yard that right now is filling with so much light. That right now is filling with so much life, you have to look away. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you for everybody.
Killer last line on that one. So much life, you have to look away. Just gorgeous. And I love the peeper poem with the frog too. That was your father's voice. My sister and I always compare when we first hear peepers, and I actually heard one about a month ago in the 70-degree day we had in January.
They start early.
Ooh, as soon as it gets warm for a day or two.
Right.
We're at it.
Thank
Beautiful
you.
poems. And thanks for the hint on spring poems.
Yeah.
All right. Well, okay, next up we have, I'm scrolling down here, Sarah Nichols. Sarah Nichols is the author of 11 chapbooks, most recently These Violent Deaths from Gray Book Press in 2022, and the creative nonfiction collection Press Play for Heartbreak from Paper Nautilus Press 2021. And that latter one was awarded the Vella Chapbook Prize in 2020. A Best of the Net nominee, Sarah writes frequently on popular culture. Her poems and essays can be found in Drunk Monkeys, Twin Pies Literary, Buffalo, Freeze Ray Poetry, Sad Girl Review, and Pink Plastic House. So please welcome Sarah Nichols. Do we have Sarah here? Sarah, are you still with us? Oh. Let's see if she's still
Hello.
with us. Oh, there you go. Now I can hear you. Good.
Hi, I apologize for that. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me. I grew up in Ridgefield, and so to finally come and read in the library it's been kind of a dream of mine. It was really my second home, so I'm very happy to be here. The first poem that I'm going to read is from my new book called These Violent Delights, and I read a lot about pulp culture, as was said, and these poems are a collection about the recently canceled science fiction series Westworld, and so this is called Robot Abattoir. Here, brides are stripped bare to their circuits, blood wiped clean, cauterized into the neon flare of the last days, the last sighs of the red world. The dreamless ghosts of Do You Remember? And I also write a lot of ekphrastic poetry. A few years ago, I had a collection published about the work of Diane Arbus. And so these are some poems from that. And this is called Little Fires, which is after Arbus's photo, albino sword swallower at a carnival in Maryland in 1970. Little Fires. My mother learned it from her mother. I don't remember when she thought I was ready. One day, I was a girl watching her mother eating impossible things. I never asked how she became. It was my turn. My mother said, "Lie back like an offering, a sacrifice for tin and fire." The wind stirred my skirt, and I opened my mouth, combustible now. The first one is mine to keep. It rests inside you, flaking off, a garden of little fires. This is another poem from that collection, and it's based on Arbus's photograph of the author Jacqueline Suzanne, who wrote The Valley of the Dolls, and her husband, Irvin Mansfield, in Los Angeles, 1969. And this is In the Valley of the Dolls. It's like a scene in one of my novels, a woman lying about her age in the lap of an older man. Maybe he makes her promises that he believes he'll keep. A cocktail sweating on the nightstands, the curtains closed on a brown sun. The air conditioner pumps Freon. What was he going to give her? A movie contract? Those days are over. Or was it a show about a lady detective who wears poochy mini dresses? She doesn't flinch. She puts the experience away, saying, "I'll remember how your camera caught me." And another thing that I do a lot of is, like, I write a lot of found poetry. And in 2018, I had a collection published that used its source, used James Ellroy's novel, The Black Dahlia, as its source. And I don't know how many people know the story of Elizabeth Short, the woman who became known as the Black Dahlia, a young murderer who was just unspeakably murdered in 1947 in Los Angeles. It was never solved, and I felt I wanted to give her voice back to her. This is called Do You Know Her? The people who say dying is easy are lying too. How could they know about the theories that never gave me a tomorrow? Or the star fuckers hanging on, telling each other how they know my last days, my last moments, the pinpoint when death rolled up and said my name. This is another one from that collection, and it's called Dresses, Jewelry, Food. I wanted to be ready. No one tells you what to pack for the trip. I met Cleopatra in the underworld, and she told me that none of it, dresses, jewelry, food, matters down here. Time cures everyone, she says. Whatever you thought you wanted dies or goes away. People worship you or forget. No one knows that until they arrive. Do I have time for one more? Thank you. This is called The Storm. I remember how little water was left in the grocery store that fall. No batteries that would keep away the darkness of stuttering lights. Depending on where you live, the storm assumed different names. Hurricane Sandy, Superstorm. I held on to other hungers, asking, what if the pills run out, marking time by one less or one more, listening to the rain beat against the windows, knowing that another darkness had carved out a home for me. I could crawl into it. There was an ocean of tiny white pills surging in my blood, a high tide of methadone taking me like ruined houses or roller coasters built too close to the water. I watched the lights flicker. I counted the pills, gobbling them like rapidly spoiling food when a refrigerator sighs and stops during a blackout. I held the storm in the palm of my hand. Thank you.
Great lines in there. If you check the chat, Sarah, you'll see some people commenting on some of your wonderful lines. Holding the storm in the palm of your hand among them. Thank you very much. Okay, next up we have, here. Irene Caycedo-Kimura is a writer and visual artist, excuse me. He is the author of 2 poetry collections, the full-length collection Common Grace from Beacon Press 2022, and Ubasute, which won the 2020 Slapering Hol Press Chapbook Competition. Slapering Hol, excuse me, I always mispronounce that. His honors include a MacDowell Fellowship, a Robert Pinsky Global Fellowship in Poetry, the St. Botolph Club Foundation Emerging Artist Award in Literature, and nominations for the Pushcart Prize, Best of the Net, and Best New Poets Anthologies. His work has appeared or is forthcoming in Beloit Poetry Journal, Plume Poetry, Poetry Daily, Rhino, Irene's Fountain, Cave Wall, and elsewhere. He currently serves as a member of the Slapering Hol Press Advisory Committee and as a reader for Beloit Poetry Journal. Aaron earned his MFA in creative writing from Boston University and is also the author and illustrator of Text Don't Call, an illustrated guide to the introverted life from Tarsher Perigee in 2017. So please welcome Irene Caycedo-Kimura.
Hello, everyone. Barb, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Ridgefield Library, thank you. I'm very happy to be here, very honored to be reading with my fellow Connecticut poets, Irene, Sarah, Brad, and Robert. Thank you so much for your beautiful, wonderful, moving readings tonight. I'm going to read 6 poems for you from my brand new book, Common Grace. This book is divided into 3 sections, so I'm going to read 2 poems from each section. And the first poem I'm going to read for you is entitled On Plein Air at Silver Sand State Park. On plein air is just a term that means, as an artist, you take your portable easel out into the open air and you paint the landscape in front of you. On plein air at Silver Sand State Park. I block in the lights and darks of a cottonwood grove that looks like a moldy muffin floating on my canvas. The flies and wetland whiff of rotten egg will keep me from staying much longer. As I use the last dab of sap green on my palette, a woman walking a black lab stops to look. She tilts her head, nods. Do you remember Bob Ross? She loved his happy trees, how he made them so easy with the edge of his brush. She yanks her dog from sniffing my easel's leg. Come on, boy, leaves me to my landscape. I end up staying all morning, struggling with my trees, trying to make art with each labored stroke. That poem could also be thought of as Ars Poetica because it's very apropos to my poetry process as well. The next poem I'm going to read is a sonnet that I wrote for a fellow artist. It's about her life, but after writing it, I realized that it could apply to so many of us, whether you're a writer, a dancer, a visual artist, those of us who seek an unconventional life. And this poem is entitled North on Route 101. She drives up the winding coast, 20 miles per hour in Pacific fog, like she's searching for a line, a la prima, with the worn bristles of a flat brush. In every twist, she focuses on the road, not the drop-offs. The fog dissipates, swatches of wild rye, reed grass, and sky spread across the windshield. Back on the other coast, dishes, pots, pans, a job, most of her clothes. Tonight, She'll sleep near the foot of Mount St. Helens, wake up to a sun eruption of Hansa yellow and cadmium orange. She'll sketch a stream tumbling toward her over a fallen cedar, a sprinkling of pastel dust in her lap. I'm going to move on to the middle section of the book, which is about my parents. It's mostly about them growing old and dying. And the first poem in this section I'm going to read is a pantoum, and it's entitled Burial. I returned my father's body to the earth, cremated as he instructed in a letter. No funeral, no obituary in the newspaper. Those who needed to know were told. I had his remains cremated as he instructed, scattered his ashes in Bodega Bay. Those who needed to know were told that I waited until my mother passed to scatter his ashes in Bodega Bay, past the jetty where we used to fish. I waited until my mother passed, poured out their dust together, past the jetty where we used to fish, from the deck of the Miss Anita, seagulls calling overhead. I poured out their dust together with a handful of Uncle George from the deck of the Miss Anita, seagulls calling overhead. No funeral, no obituary in the newspaper. With a handful of Uncle George, I returned their bodies to the earth. My next poem is about my parents when they first got married, before my sister and I came along. And this poem is entitled The Hardest Part. The fire truck siren downstairs raided the air of my mother's dreams. She'd scream in her sleep, my father told me, even after we married. More than a decade past the Second World War, for him, American concentration camps, for her, the firebombing of Tokyo. They moved into a San Francisco apartment that rented to Japs, a one-bedroom walk-up above the Post Street fire station. They painted their bathroom black. It was in style then. Shelved books, unboxed a new rice cooker, watered a shrub of Japanese maple, potted for their future garden. When the station got a call in the middle of the night, the rumble of the overhead door crumbled into the wreck that was once her home. Swirling lights flashed ancient trees into flames through the thin silk curtains of her eyelids. No warning, no drill, no cover. My father stilled her body, his broad hand on her shoulder or hip, as they lay in the dark, listening to the slowing of her breath. The hardest part of those nights, he said, was waiting, sometimes hours, for the truck and the men to come back. I have two more poems I'd like to share with you, and these are from the third and final section of the book. And this section is about my wife, Louisa, who is also a poet, and our relationship and the life we've built together. And this next poem is entitled 5 Minutes on High. Louisa stabs the taut cellophane on a tray of frozen palak paneer. Pop, 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 10 to 12 times with a bony knife, even though the package says 2 to 3. I think of Psycho, the screeching violins, and Louisa as Norman Bates in Maternal Drag. Everyone's haunted by something. She puts our dinner in the microwave, punches in 5 minutes on high. Over the oven's drone, she tells me a man grabbed her in the stairwell of her apartment building when she was 7, clamped his hand over her face. Unable to breathe, she bit his finger, blood salting her lips before her mother heard her scream and came out the door. The man ran, but was caught weeks later with another little girl, a scalpel in his pocket. Neighborhood dads tried throwing him off a roof before the cops came. 05, 04, 03, Louisa removes the tray before the microwave beeps. She rips back the perforated film, releases the steamy aroma of spinach, turmeric, garam masala. She can't watch Indiana Jones drown in my video game or look at those faceless willow tree figurines in Hallmark stores. She doesn't even like when frozen food can't breathe. And the last poem I'd like to read for you, I was thinking one day, what would it be like if I knew that today was the last day I'd be alive? What would it be like if today was the last day I would spend on this earth? And I wrote this poem. This poem is not about dying. It's really about contentment. And it's also a love poem. And before I read it, thank you, Barb, once again. Thank you, Ridgefield Library. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight to hear us read. This poem is entitled, If This Were the Day. If this were the day, I'd still shower, shave, eat breakfast for the pleasure, a toasted bagel, a schmear, lox, red onion, capers, definitely capers, an iced mocha. I'd skip the stretching, crunches, push-ups, go right to the garden, check the milkweed for monarchs, the yarrow planted yesterday. Back in the house, straighten out my studio, just a little. Open my laptop, start a poem, a few lines for drama. After emailing you my passwords, go lie on the sofa, text you a heart, rest the phone on my chest. I listen to you stop singing slightly out of tune in the kitchen. Wait for the vibration of your answer. Drift. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Oh, wonderful. Oh my gosh. I hope everyone here sees what an amazing diversity of poets we have here in the state. We're very, very lucky to have them, not only in our state and in our literary world, but also reading to us this evening. So thank you. All 5 of you are wonderful readers. I want to also invite anyone, any poets in the audience who haven't yet sent information about being interested in possibly joining a future reading too. My email is just barbjennis@gmail.com. Just send me a brief bio and your town of residence, because I do try to get one from each, one poet from each geographical region. But let me ask, does anyone have any questions for the poet, a specific poet, or the poets as a whole that you'd like to have addressed? No? I have to ask Erin, if I may.
Sure.
How do you and Louisa share each other's work as you're writing? Are you each other's editors, or?
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. That's the advantage of having a spouse that's also a poet. We're each other's first readers. Yeah.
That's-
It's very handy. It's very good too.
Again, oh boy, thank you, Brad and Irene and Sarah and Robert and Erin. Oh, it was a wonderful evening. And thank you, Lucy, and thank you, Ridgefield Library, for hosting.
Thank you, Barb. I'm sorry it's over. It seemed like it
I know.
only lasted for a few minutes.
Can't
It was
believe
lovely. Just a joy. Thank you. All right.
Y'all, as they used to say, y'all come back now here.
Okay. Good night, everyone.